Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Mile High Hockey Podcast. I'm Mike Evans. Thank you so much for tuning in and checking out what's going on with the Avs. The first game with the new look Avs on Friday night against Minnesota was a 2-1 overtime win. Fitting, wasn't it? Kind of ironic in a nice way that Valeri Nichushkin, back in his first game with the Avs, scores the overtime winner. I thought it was tremendous on the ice afterwards. He did the interview and the response from the fans. I think that, fans want Val to do well, and everyone loves a good comeback story, right? We all love a good redemption story, and Val leaving the team under very murky circumstances during the playoffs last year, leaving again this year. I think people are very sympathetic to the idea that even athletes can go through some tough times at times, and the fact that they're willing to admit it and try to do something about it. I think you root for people to be able to come out on the other side and be well, be healed, be cured. But there is also the element of, hey, we're hockey fans, right? And yeah, we want the best for Valeri Nichushkin, but ultimately we want the best for the Avs. And I think it's been proven by now that having Valeri Nichushkin back and playing at a high level means everything to the Avs. The numbers back it up. It's enough of a sample size that you look at it and say that with Valeri Nichushkin, the Avs are a well above 500 team. Without him, they're barely a 500 mediocre team. So to have Val back is and to have him contribute right away is huge. It also is a real credit to him that while he was away, whatever was the situation, that he did keep himself in good enough shape that it really didn't take long for him to get back ramped up to be NHL ready. It was really only about a week from the moment he came out of the program to jumping back on the ice for the Avalanche and obviously being able to contribute. So when we talked about some of the real boxes to check for the Avalanche down the stretch here before the playoffs, I know last week I said number one to me is getting Val back up to the level he was at. So that's a good start. And number two was seeing how the new players would fit in. And so we got our first look at the newest acquisitions. And hey, look, it's gonna take some time. And it's why I go back to Nathan MacKinnon talking about at the trade deadline when he was at the All-Star game, saying if he has one beef with the trade deadline is that it comes up as late in the season as it does, that it doesn't give teams that much time to acclimate their new players, really only 18, 19, 20 games. And Jared Bednar talked about this over the weekend, what he's going to be doing here for a lot of the remainder of the regular season, and that is trying different combinations and seeing if those combinations work, which is something he has to do. But you also wonder, at what point do you just have to say, okay, the experimenting is done. Now this is kind of our plan going into the playoffs. Sure, it is subject to change based on how the team is playing, but you have to have some sense of how this thing is going to look going into the playoffs. And we're only a game into it, and they still have time. But I would think that is in terms of a time frame that you kind of want to use these next, 8 to 10 games to maybe do your experimenting, and then over the final 6, 7, 8 games of the season, take what you feel is your plan and then execute it, see how it looks, see how the combinations work, and give it a chance to kind of take hold. One thing that I feel really good about, and I think you should feel good about too if you're an Avalanche fan, is the endorsement of Nathan MacKinnon. Now, Nathan MacKinnon, in my experience, having talked to thousands of athletes over the years, Nathan MacKinnon is a pretty boring quote, and that's by design. And I'm not being critical at all. It's just the way he is. But when he does say stuff and he's trying to make a point, it usually is something that you can take as gospel. And so when he comes out and says, I really like the moves that we made, I really like how management went out and made moves, it feels good. But he did say, he goes, it wasn't that I hated our team, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically came out and said, I thought we could be better. I wasn't really feeling it. We were okay, but I thought we could do more. And for management to recognize that, go out and make the moves that they did is something that I, MacKinnon, and the rest of the people in this room feel really good about. So it was that kind of endorsement because remember, MacKinnon was the guy who wasn't afraid to come out and say before the season began that last year's roster, he said, in effect, I never felt it. It never felt right. Going into the playoffs, I never really felt like we had the team necessary to defend our Stanley Cup, and boy, was he proven right. So for him to come out and say, not only after not feeling that last year's roster was the right mix, but then coming out and saying, I didn't think this year's roster was the right mix up until this trade deadline, that speaks volumes for me. And for him to come out and say, I really like the moves that we made, to me, that's not Nathan MacKinnon happy hockey talk. That's something of substance. So take that for what you will as an Avalanche fan, but I believe the endorsement of Nathan MacKinnon on these moves is a big one. You also get a little understanding about why they did some of the things they did with the announcement that Logan O'Connor is going to miss the rest of the season with hip surgery. Because there was a part of me, and maybe you felt the same way as they were making all these moves. It was like, wow, you're really loading up, and depth is a great thing, but there are going to be some guys who are going to be left out. And there are going to be some guys who are going to be fighting for ice time. And part of it was with the idea that when Logan O'Connor comes back, how's this all going to look? Well, Logan O'Connor's not coming back because of the hip surgery. So you got to figure that the Avalanche were aware of this happening, or a very real possibility that this was going to happen with LOC. And so they went out and made moves to add replacements for LOC. And that's smart, by the way. That's incredibly smart to be able, and maybe fortuitous that they at least knew enough about the direction that they were going in with Logan O'Connor that they would have to be able to make some moves to cover his loss. I feel bad for him because this guy was having a career year. He was on pace for career highs in goals, points, his time on ice. He's been a terrific player for the Avs, his shorthanded abilities, and really turning himself into a really good bottom six forward for a team. And I think back to when I was doing some University of Denver Pioneer hockey games when he was a player for the Pioneers. Jim Montgomery was the coach. And I remember at the time thinking about Logan O'Connor, hey, this is a good, solid, blue-collar college hockey player. And I'll be completely honest, at no point did I feel I was watching a guy that I would be confident would end up carving out a 6-year career and would be putting up the kind of numbers that he has, to the point where the realization, the news that he's going to be out for the rest of the season with a hip injury would be met with, oh, man, that really hurts. I didn't think I was looking at that kind of player at the University of Denver. A lot of these players that end up turning out to be bottom six type forwards were guys that were studs in college. And they end up having to kind of accept a different kind of role or remake themselves in the pros. Logan O'Connor is the same kind of role player with the Avs that he was in college, but he's been able to really take that college performance and really build on it. And it's an admirable story. It really is, and easy to root for, and which makes him having to sit out now because of that injury really stings. So as we're talking about injuries, Jared Bednar shed a little bit more light on a possible Gabe Landeskog return, and we got a little bit more information about it. He was adamant, Bednar was saying that, look, there's a date that we have in mind, and Gabe is not coming back before that date. So we're not going to rush anything. We're not going to try to force anything. We're dealing with a guy's career here, and he kept talking about this date. Nothing's going to happen before this date. Well, so you try to kind of extrapolate what's the date, right? Well, this knee cartilage replacement surgery that Gabe had was done back in the middle of May. And right from the time that the surgery was done, it was being talked about as a likely 12-month recovery. So 12 months, a year, surgery was done like May 10th. So if you're to read all that and kind of connect the dots, it would tell me that in their mind, nothing's going to happen with the Gabe Landeskog return until May 10th, middle of May, which is probably, second round of the playoffs? So maybe that's a possible return date for Gabe Landeskog, if all goes right, is the second round of the playoffs. Okay. Hey, I listen, I'm not trying to pour, cold water on the whole thing. I would love to see it happen. Are you kidding me? Get Gabe back, your captain, the player that he is. Holy smokes. It'd be incredible. It'd be an incredible comeback story. But man, you think about it. Let's say that's their idea. Let's say we're not even going to do anything with Gabe until the middle of May. Second round of the playoffs. You're really telling me that a guy who has not played since June 26th of 2022 is going to jump back in for his first action in round 2 of the playoffs? Hey, if anybody could do it, it would be Gabe Landeskog. And Gabe's had the kind of career, and Gabe is the kind of player in person that I wouldn't put anything past Gabe. But man, that would be remarkable. That'd be astounding, especially if he would be able to come in and, jump onto a, second line winger playing 15 minutes a night and jumping in and being productive for the Avalanche. That would be an incredible story. I mean, make movies about this kind of stuff. I'm not kidding. So I'm hoping for it, rooting for it, but I don't know. Listening to Bednar over the weekend, I kind of got the sense that as Avs fans, it'd be great if it drops in our lap. Awesome. What a great issue to deal with. The return of Gabe and how's he going to fit in. But honestly, my advice to you as a fan, and I'm going to take it myself, I'm not counting on Gabe in the playoffs. So I'm not looking at Gabe. It's why what the Avalanche did at the trade deadline was really encouraging, because it wasn't like they were quiet with their moves and then came out and said, yeah, we didn't do a whole lot, but, hey, we think Gabe might be coming back. That's a possibility. That would have been, I think, a real insult to Avalanche fans. Credit to the Avs for certainly not acting that way. They made their moves with the idea that, hey, if Gabe comes back, awesome. What a great problem to have. But in the meantime, we're going to go about our business making moves, making acquisitions, filling holes, providing depth with the idea that he won't be back. And that's the smart way to do it. So applaud the Avalanche for that. Root like heck for Gabe to be able to pull this off. But do so with the understanding that if he comes back, great. It's bonus. It's gravy. But I wouldn't count on it. One last thing I wanted to bring up. I thought this was really cool. Two more things. This is going to be a fun week because the Avalanche go out on the road. It's their British Columbia, Alberta swing. And we're going to have some really cool premier award potentially deciding matchups along the way, because the Avalanche go to Vancouver, which automatically brings up the whole Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes debate, best defenseman. And then you got Avs Edmonton and Connor McDavid making a late push for the Hart Trophy for the MVP that Nathan MacKinnon is trying to win. So we got a couple of these showcase matchups that could perhaps play a role in deciding who wins the individual awards. So good chance to see the Avs out on the road, continue to watch the new additions, see how they all fit in. I am also curious to see the next time the Avalanche or anybody that they're playing goes to overtime. Will we see what Minnesota did catch on? So did you see this? Minnesota went to overtime in a game, and they gained control of the puck, so it's 3-on-3. They had possession of the puck, and they pulled the goaltender. Talk about a, ballsy move. They pulled the goaltender. So why is this so gutsy? Because in overtime, you've gone to overtime. You're guaranteed a point. Not so fast. If you go to overtime and you pull the goalie and you give up an empty net goal, guess what? You lose the hockey game. You get no points. So this was pretty gutsy. They took the point that they had in the bank, and they were willing to risk it to try to get the 2 points. They pulled the goalie. They got the goal. They got the win. They ended up getting the extra point. But I'm curious to see, just like Patrick Waugh, when he was here with the Avs, set a new precedent for pulling the goalie when you're down a goal or 2 goals. Typically it was always traditionally you would pull the goalie with like a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes, but usually it was around a minute and a half, minute 15. You'd pull the goalie for the extra skater, try to get the equalizer. Well, Patty Waugh with the Avalanche, he started doing it with 3, 4, 5 minutes left in the game. He would pull the goaltender. And that is something that is caught on now with the NHL. I'm curious to see if this catches on. The idea of, hey, you know what? Having a point's nice, but we need the 2 points. And we need to go for it. And we're prepared to risk that point by pulling the goaltender in overtime. I'm curious to see if it catches on or if this was just a one-time thing. Because, for a team like Minnesota that's trying to make the playoffs, every point matters. But at that point, you feel like going for 2 is more important. You got possession of the puck. Let's pull the goalie and see what happens. So, pretty gutsy move. Let's see if it catches on. That'll do it for this edition of the Mile High Hockey Podcast presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. We'll be back again later in the week with a couple more Avalanche games to discuss. Looking forward to it.